have some bad news and some good news for you. The bad news is that the game of investing is rigged. Most financial institutions, advisors, and other experts are out there to legally steal your invested money. That is why most investors automatically lose the lion's share of their future returns without even being aware of it. For a typical family, this amounts to over $1 million over the long run. So if you're playing the investing game by their rules, you are toast.
Some pretty strong words from our special guest today, author, entrepreneur, and award-winning speaker, Robert Rolih. His new book, The $1 Million Decision, looks at why he believes the financial services system is largely rigged against everyday investors. I've explored the same topic in my own books, but the question is, does it mean that everyone's better off becoming a do-it-yourselfer? Well, we'll talk about that and much, much more. It's time to tune out the hype and focus on the facts. Facts that matter to you, the income generation. Let's get started. Get ready to separate reality from myth.
With us, David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
But David Scranton says, hey, not so fast.
How does it affect the markets? How does it affect the economy? Thanks to efficiencies in new technology and a staff of veteran analysts and portfolio managers, Sound Income Strategies strives to set new standards and bring institutional-style investing to your portfolio. Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Income Generation. I'm David Scranton. Now, you might be wondering, gee, Dave, why are you, a financial advisor in your own right, sitting down today to talk with a man whose new book claims to give you the power to fire your financial advisor? Well, the truth is that I agree that you should fire your financial advisor if he isn't the right advisor for you. And I've said this many, many times before on the show. I also agree that a lot of advisors in our industry are part of a rigged system, often without even realizing it. I'm talking about a system rigged in favor of Wall Street and against the average investor saving for retirement. We'll talk today about how it's rigged, why it's rigged, and what you can do about it with our special guest, Robert Rolih, author of the new bestseller, The $1 Million Decision. Get out of the rigged game of investing and add $1 million to your net worth. And as always, we'll also get some fresh perspectives today from our Financial Advisors Roundtable. But first, let's examine some cold, hard truths you should know when looking for financial guidance. Basically, there are two major reasons that many financial advisors and brokers end up becoming part of this rigged system, or as I sometimes call it, part of the club. Those reasons can be interconnected, and they have to do with the way most advisors are trained and with their business models in which they work. The best way to illustrate this connection is to point out that I myself was, yes, once part of this rigged system, part of this thing I call the club. And in my case, like most, it wasn't intentional. It was simply that at that time, I was still a follower, not a leader. I had a business model built mainly around putting clients in the stock market and keeping them there. In fact, to a large extent, that's what I was trained to do, and it's certainly what I was encouraged to do by managers, colleagues, industry publications, the media, just about everyone from whom I'd gotten information. 30 years later, the only thing about that scenario that's different is me. You see, unlike most advisors, I soon saw the club for what it was and was able to get out. I started doing my own research and listening to the needs and goals of my clients rather than focusing excessively on the biased teachings of my own industry. Why are the teachings biased? The answer is that, in a way, it needs to be for the system to work. In fact, it would be difficult for the system to function in any other way. Bias is a necessary byproduct of the way Wall Street and corporate America work. But unfortunately, that bias spreads like cancer through every related industry, including financial services. Please remember that, as I've explained before, a Wall Street CEO's first fiduciary responsibility is to his shareholders, not to you, not to his investors, customers, or account holders. His main duty is to maximize shareholder value. In other words, maximizing income to his company. And one of his primary ways of doing this is by keeping you invested in the markets as much as he possibly can. In fact, if he doesn't, revenues and commissions and fees go down, and shareholder value decreases. Obviously, people are more apt to stay invested if they believe the markets are strong and going to go up. In other words, when investors are optimistic. So the question becomes, could it be that Wall Street CEOs feel a pressing responsibility to paint a rosy picture and to speak optimistically about the markets more often than not? That decision is for you to make. Now, that might be okay if the financial media cover the markets objectively, but unfortunately, it often doesn't. In fact, in most instances, they're simply parroting that rosy outlook by the CEO. Why? Well, could it be that it's because the CEO's firm is one of their major advertisers that drives revenue for that particular type of media? You decide. And even that might be okay if most investors conducted their own independent research. But many don't want to make the effort. And many advisors work for firms where they're strongly urged to use in-house research sources or specific third-party sources. But the question becomes, is that research objective? Or could it be that those third-party sources are often owned wholly or in part by Wall Street brokerage firms? Again, you decide. Hopefully that gives you an idea what I mean when I say Wall Street's cancer is a bias that spreads like cancer. It spreads vertically through an organization and then horizontally through other sources such as the media. You see, and it isn't really a malicious thing, it's just the way the system works. It creates this optimist club that really has little to do with the needs or concerns of everyday investors. It only has to do with Wall Street's sense of self-preservation. The good news is that I'm not the only advisor who's turned in the resignation card from the club. There are others. You just have to be informed and diligent in order to find them. Robert Rolih grew up in a poor backwater village in a small country, yet managed to become a successful entrepreneur. But then, sadly, he lost most of his money because he trusted certain so-called financial gurus that inspired him to invest 7 years doing his own research about what goes on behind the scenes in the financial services industry. The result is his new book, The $1 Million Decision: Get Out of the Rigged Game of Investing and Add $1 million to Your Net Worth. Robert, welcome to the show.
Hi, David. It's a great honor to be here.
$1 million to the net worth, that's a big number, so I'm looking forward to our interview today. Tell me, briefly, why you believe the investment game is rigged for most average investors, most members of the income generation, as we refer to our viewers.
Yeah, the investing game is rigged because all the big Wall Street firms and a lot of financial gurus and so-called experts are basically very motivated to sell very bad financial products, financial products where they profit the most. So most people end up with these bad financial products where they think that their money is working for them, but in reality, it's only working for the financial industry.
It's funny. I just mentioned just a minute ago that the fiduciary responsibility of a Wall Street CEO is first to his shareholders and not to his customers or investors. So that means obviously that if there's two products or investments he could recommend, one that's really good for his company and just okay for investors, or one that's really good for investors and just okay for his company, he must recommend the former, not the latter, or he violates his fiduciary responsibility. So
right.
We're very much on the same page, but can you share the story of how you first learned about this system and when it first dawned on you that it really was rigged?
Yeah, so when I started in business, I started in my student years totally from zero. And in 5 years, after 5 years of hard work, I became an overnight success. So I made a lot of money. This was, 2005 was the first year where I made a six-figure income, and it was like dreams coming true for me. But I didn't want to spend all that money. I'm not a person who would spend a lot. So I knew that I need to save, I need to invest. So I started to invest that money. But because I was an entrepreneur, I didn't have a clue about investing. I didn't have a clue about money management. So I trusted who? Yeah, you are probably right, financial experts. And year after year, I gave them my money. So after several years of doing that, me and my wife, we said to ourselves, okay, let's take a look at what is going on with our money. So we ordered all the account statements. And when they arrived in the envelopes, I went, are there some zeros missing? But unfortunately, zeros were not missing. We lost most of our money. And that was the start of the darkest period of our lives. I almost lost my sanity. I almost lost my wife at the time, and I almost lost my motivation to work. So it was a really dark time for me. And I was very lucky then that Brian Tracy, who was my biggest mentor and one of our speakers at the events that we organize, we were hosting him for the third time, and after the seminar, we went to dinner, and I told him all about my problems, and then he said something that totally changed my life. He said, Robert, it doesn't matter how much you earn. All that matters is if you have the skills to manage your money and to invest it. And at that moment, I realized I don't have these skills. So I made perhaps the most important decision of my life, and that was I will become one of the most financially literate people in this world. So that began my journey in the financial sector.
Great words of wisdom from a mentor for whom you and I both have a lot of respect. Brian Tracy's always been one of my heroes. So how did you go about doing that? I mean, how much work did it take to learn, to really become an expert? I mean, was it like another full-time job almost? Tell us about the process, the journey you went through to try to become more knowledgeable.
So the first thing I did was to attend all the seminars, mostly in London. So I attended a lot of seminars, a lot of courses, and I read a lot of books. I also did a lot of research online, and I talked with a lot of insiders from the industry. So that gave me, let's say, behind the scenes look to the industry. And I started to realize that this industry is really rigged and that the average person who wants to invest his savings or her savings is basically doomed from the start.
Okay. And, in the 30 seconds we have left, tell us, what are some of the major things that you see that cause this problem, the reasons it's rigged, in 30 seconds or less before we take commercial break?
Yeah, it's very simple. Like we already talked about, the reward systems in the financial industry are basically rewarding financial, let's say, CEOs and advisors who are recommending bad products. And also there is
so it's the core. So it's the core of how they're wired, I believe, is what you're saying, the system. So listen, I'm sorry to cut you off. We need to take a commercial break. We'll be right back with more about your philosophies from Robert Rolih. Stick with us. We'll be right back. If you're near or in retirement, head over to theincomegeneration.com and download your special report written specifically for the needs of the income generation, again, those born before 1966. I'm David Scranton, and you've been watching The Income Generation. I've talked many times about how many advisors end up with business models that make them part of this rigged system, but the problem really starts before that, in the schools and institutions where advisors actually learn their trade. Too often as advisors, we're taught to put our clients into a box, to put them into perhaps a handful of preset categories. In other words, to generalize. We're taught that it's a good business practice to apply certain rules and formulas, rules of thumb, if you will, to every case, rather oftentimes than to consider each case specifically and to work with clients individually. Now, yes, it may be easier to do things that way, but I know from experience that it isn't good business practice, and it certainly isn't what's best for our clients. Here's a great example. Advisors used to be taught this formula. 100 minus your age equals the percentage, or I should say the maximum percentage of your assets that you should have in stocks. In other words, under this formula, if you're 30 years old, the most you should have in the stock market is 70%. If you're 70 years old, the most you should have in the stock market is 30%. Now, over the years, that rule has changed a bit. Today, the formula is often considered to be the rule of 110 or the rule of 120, where you subtract your age from one of those higher numbers. And that's supposedly because life expectancies have increased. But the question becomes, is that really the reason that this rule has changed? Or is it perhaps just to justify having a higher allocation in risky Wall Street products? You decide. Either way, any advisor or individual who would blindly follow the rule is simply participating in this rigged system. They're putting Wall Street's need for self-preservation ahead of their own or their clients' financial goals and interests, whether they realize it or not. Rules and formulas that don't take into account an individual's goals as well as current market conditions or about 100 other important factors are just more examples of this club bias, the bias of Wall Street rhetoric. So why then are investors taught such rules in the first place? Well, these schools are supposed to be independent and unbiased. In theory, hey, after all, they're supposed to be educating us. Well, could it be that a lot of these schools and institutions that in which we're taught that they receive financial contributions from Wall Street? Again, you can make that decision. But no matter how you slice it, the cancer tends to spread far and wide, and that's just the way the system works. And the best way to avoid getting burned by it is to be aware of it. And with that in mind, I'd like to welcome back to our show today's guest, Robert Rolih. In a recent blog post, it's funny, you shared some quotes from your book that sounded similar to things that I've said in the past. And I'd like to go through a few of those and have you elaborate on them if you don't mind.
Yeah.
The first one, which I agree with completely, is the most popular investing products can be the worst ones for investors. Why is that, and which products are you referring to?
Maybe the best example is mutual funds, because mutual funds have very high commissions and fees, and they are basically the most profitable thing for the financial institutions to sell. So that is why most people end up owning mutual funds.
Okay, perfect. Now you also said when investing, greed could be your worst enemy. Again, you're not going to get any argument from me, but tell our income generation members in your own words why you believe that to be true.
There are a lot of advertisements and a lot of ads online offering you get-rich-quick schemes and millions trading Forex and stocks and penny stocks and stuff like this. But most of the time, only the professionals are making money in the short-term trading space. So if you are just an average guy and if you don't want to spend 5 years learning about that, you have no chance of succeeding at getting great returns in the short run. Only the professionals can do that. And like I said, it's a long, long way to become a professional. And even if you spend a lot of time and energy learning these things, it's still, very small, very little chance of succeeding.
In New York City, it's funny because Wall Street and Madison Avenue don't really intersect. But I guess what you're saying is when it comes to investing, Wall Street and Madison Avenue can intersect, and that's a bad thing. And you also said, love risk when making money, hate risk when investing money. Explain.
Yeah. That's the foundation of my financial success formula that I talk about in the book. And this formula says that there are two parts, there are two sets of skills that you need to have if you want to win the financial game of life. The first is money-making skills, and the second set of skills are investing skills. So you need to have both. But the problem is that most people are too aggressive when it comes to investing, and they start to gamble with their money and are not aggressive enough when they are making money. They are not learning enough money-making skills. They are not learning enough business skills. They don't take enough calculated risks in the money-making area, So that is why I say love risk when making money, because there you need to take some risks if you want to increase your income, but hate risk when you are investing money, because there you need to be very careful and cautious not to make any huge mistakes with your money and not to go into the crazy gambling financial products and so on.
Now it's interesting, this next thing, you're kind of sort of a man after my own heart here, because in my own book, Return on Principle, I said there's seven core values to help protect your money in good times and bad. And one of those values is detail orientation, the importance of that. And You also say that knowing the right detail gets you a great return. Ignore them and you crash and burn. And that's not a neat statement just because it rhymes. It's also a neat statement because it's accurate, is it not?
Yeah, that was the reason why I lost a lot of money, most of my money in the past when I was investing it, because I didn't know these details. And if you are not financially literate, if you don't know these things, then you are just, a sitting duck and you are gone quickly financially.
Yeah, it's, well, the devil is in the details. We all know that. And you also said that you have 30 to 50 times better chance of creating a successful business than is succeeding as a short-term trader. Tell us about that.
So I did a simple calculation, and I went out and I researched how many people are really succeeding at short-term trading. And my number that I came up was less than 1%. So less than 1%. Less than 1% of people who go into the short-term trading succeed. And if you take a look at the business, how many business owners succeed, let's say they have profitable business in 5 or 10 years from when they started, the figure is much, much, much higher. So that is why I say don't go into the short-term trading, you will lose your money. If you have too much time, start to learn business skills and start your own business or something. But don't go into the short-term trading. It's a loss. You will lose your money, you will lose your time.
So in 45 seconds or less, please tell us, what do you believe is the right investing philosophy? What strategy did you develop that you find that works and you think might be transferable to our income generation viewers?
So the foundation of my philosophy just to pick the low cost, low commission investing products, where you keep most of the future returns and not the financial industry. So if I just mention one thing, that would be it. So low cost investing product where you keep the commissions and fees to a minimum. That's it.
Sure, and that's where the devil has to be in the details. If you're willing to do your own hard work and research and roll up your sleeves, you invest in individual securities where you don't have any fees. If not, you have index funds, ETFs, and things like that. So, yeah, Robert, thanks so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. It's been great having you. And coming up in just a bit, I'm going to talk more about knowing